So you've decided you wanted to start collecting for 3DS, and first thing obviously is to pick up a system. But upon looking, you discover there are actually 6 different models to choose from, all of which can essentially play the exact same games. At first glance, it may seem that the choice is actually pretty easy. It's the new 3DS XL. Obviously, it has the largest screen, most powerful processor, is probably going to be the most reliable because it's the newest one. It has the new thumbstick. But there are some reasons why you may want to look at some of the other ones as well. Cue the theme music. Oh yeah, I don't have any theme music. So the original 3DS was released in 2011, and the series was ultimately retired in 2020. The 3DS was a follow-up to the DS, obviously with 3D added, thus DS to 3DS. In addition to the 3D, it also featured a analog stick, something that moving into finally into 3D portable gaming was something that was going to be needed. So in addition, it also had better specs, faster processor, more RAM, all that kind of stuff. But it was backwards compatible to the DS and could play all the DS games. As I mentioned before, it was 3D. This was actually a pretty big thing at the time because almost every other 3D out there required glass, some sort of glasses. But this was actually, the technology was actually built into the screen. In 2012, the 3DS XL was released. It had pretty much the same exact specs, but with a larger screen, as you can see here. With the larger screen came a higher price, though. Less portability as well. You can see, in addition to the screens being larger, the unit itself is actually much larger. You can see, actually, if you look at the space below the D-pad. Additionally, some people feel that the larger screen actually tends to make the relatively low resolution of the 3DS look worse than it does on the small screen. The small screen generally tends to look a lot sharper than the big screen, which runs at the same resolution, so the image is essentially blown up. So some people do prefer the look of the smaller screen because of that. Also, the colors on the XL are a lot more subdued. In addition to the outside being more satin, the inside around the screen, instead of having the bright colors on the bottom screen and the gloss around the top screen, they're generally either a satin black or a satin white, depending on the system. There were many limited edition 3DS XLs, though, such as the Year of Luigi 30th Anniversary and the Persona Q. The 2DS was released in 2013. This was actually the first Nintendo portable system that doesn't fold since the GBA, so it's basically just one flat area with 2 screens, which actually aren't technically 2 screens. It's actually one screen that is broken up and displays 2 separate pictures. This also has no 3D capabilities. It does play all of the same 3DS games. However, it just plays them in 2D. Basically the same thing as if you just took your 3DS and just turned off the 3D. Since one of the most common issues with the DS and 3DS units are actually broken ribbon cables going to the top screen, it seems like having a system that doesn't fold would actually cause it to be a lot more reliable. However, the issue here is that although you don't have broken ribbon cables from the system folding, you do have a screen that is basically susceptible to damage, very prevalent, and may ultimately be the reason why the new 2DS XL was actually a clamshell again. The new 3DS was launched in 2014 and 2015 worldwide in both regular and XL versions. It featured a new C-Stick nub, which basically was a second analog stick, and a faster CPU, which actually had specific games that came out. There were only a few games, but there were some specific games that only ran on the new 3DS. Additionally, they also had face tracking, which was via a sensor near the camera that would actually sense as your face moved, it would adjust the 3D accordingly, because the original 3DS had kind of a sweet spot where the 3D worked perfectly, and once you moved a few inches one way or the other, it really wouldn't tend to work as well anymore. So they basically put in the sensor that could adjust the 3D accordingly, so it would be optimal pretty much no matter where your head was. The non-XL version of the new 3DS featured interchangeable cover plates. As you can see here, this one is actually a wood veneer. It's not plastic, it's actually real wood. There were many different ones that you could get. They were packaged separately, and you could buy them for, I think it was the equivalent of about $10 or $15. Many of them have gone way up in value since. And the systems were really limited outside of Japan. Basically, though, you could just remove 2 screws from the back, and after you remove those 2 screws, or just loosen them rather, the front and rear shells would just pop off, and then you could replace those with whatever you want. The new 3DS XL was actually very similar to the original 3DS XL, with the exception of the new features which were mentioned previously, such as the faster CPU, the C-Stick, and the face tracking for 3D. There were also some quality of life improvements. Some of the features were moved around, such as, where you place the card or the power switch or things like that were changed. But essentially, dimensionally, it was very similar. I think it may have been a little bit taller and a little bit thinner. So here you can see the 2 units again compared. You can see beyond the obvious difference in size, they're actually very similar in terms of layout. And finally, the last version of the 3DS was actually the new 2DS XL, which is actually very similar to the new 3DS XL, except without the 3D, obviously. This one's designed to be a lot more durable, with things like covers for the game card and the SD card. So it looks similar, but it is quite a bit different in terms of material and build than the 3DS. So I'll finish this video off with some comparisons between old and new models of some of the systems. Here's the original 3DS XL and the new 3DS XL. You can see they're very similar in terms of size overall. And here's the original and new 3DS non-XL. You can see again these are fairly similar in size, with the new 3DS being a little bit larger on the top, and the original 2DS versus the new 2DS XL. So you can see that the new 2DS XL has a larger screen, and in addition is just larger because it's a clamshell design and is able to fold, whereas the original one did not fold. So hopefully this video has given you some insight into the differences between the various 2DS and 3DS systems. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below and like and subscribe.